Hi, I'm Liz from the Missouri Star Quilt Company. You may recognize my voice from Missouri Star Live with Misty or from The Final Stitch with Natalie. Usually I'm behind the camera, but today I'm in front of the camera to show you how to make this June Tailor insulated lunchbox. I've made several samples so you can see how versatile that you can make these. So let's get started and I'll show you how to make this lunchbox. So to make this project, we have the insulated lunchbox sewing kit from June Tailor. In the kit is a zipper, strapping, instructions, and this handy plastic piece that will make the bottom of our bag sturdy. What we'll need is a ½ yard of lining, a ¼ yard for our straps, and a ½ yard for our main fabric. And that will make this cute bag. If you're using a directional print, I'm going to recommend you use 3/4 of a yard. I'll use painter's tape to help me get nice straight lines while I'm quilting. I'll need sturdy pins. I'm going to use a Microtex sharp needle to go through all those layers. I'll use clips to help hold all the layers together. A rotary cutter, scissors, and some snips will be handy. All right, so today I'm going to show you how to make this cheeseburger version. I think this is really fun. It's a great way to use novelty fabrics that actually speak to the person you're making it for, whether it's yourself or someone you love. So our fabrics then are going to be the outside fabric. So again, I've got the cheeseburgers, and it's directional. So I'm going to ask you to get a 3/4 yard cut, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute. Then we've got a color for our straps. That's a 1/4 yard. And then our lining. And everything else is in the package. So once we've brought our fabrics, I'm going to open the package. And in here, we've got a Zippity-Do-Done zipper. And these are pretty fantastic because we'll be able to slide our project in and sew it down. We don't have to create the casing. Casing's created for us. One of the things that's fun about this is it's pre-printed. So you don't have to worry about your measurements being square. They've already done that for you. So we're going to start by just slicing this in half, and then the first instruction is to cut roughly 1 inch around this batting. And I'm going to make some big cuts with my rotary cutter. And I'm going to not necessarily worry all that much about cutting out this inside. And I'll tell you why too, is that this adds some extra stability while we're sewing. So if I'm getting really specific, I can line up my markings and get exactly 1 inch away. But I also don't have to be that specific. So I can go roughly 1 inch because we're going to eventually trim it down. And again, I'm not going to cut in here because when we layer these, I want that to hold onto as I'm working with the project. All right, so I'm going to show you how to make one side. You'll make both sides the exact same way. So I'm going to fold this up. And you can assembly line this so you're doing both sides at the same time. But again, I'm just going to show you the one side today. So the other things I want you to see are that there's a top zipper edge printed right on here. And then on here it says, sew on the dashed line, cut on the solid line. So all the instructions you very much need are right here on the batting. And it's an insulated batting, so you might be able to hear that. It has material in it that keeps cold things cold and hot things hot. So it's perfect for a lunch bag. So once we have this cut, we're going to cut our fabric. So now let's cut our fabric. I've chosen the hamburgers because I think it's really fun, but it's also a directional fabric. So I want to talk to you about that for a second. When you have a directional fabric, I want you to get 3/4 of a yard instead of a ½ yard because you're not going to be sure which direction the directional fabric is going to run. In our case with the cheeseburgers, it's running with the fabric. So to get our 16 by 20 inch squares, rectangles, we'll be able to use the ½ yard cut that's in the book. However, if our directional fabric was running the length of fabric, we need that 20 inches to run the direction. So we would need more than the ½ yard. So that's what I'm going to say, get a 3/4 yard cut. But I'm not going to let you waste anything. That extra is going to turn into a fun pocket. So let me show you how that works. We're going to start by cutting this. And I don't necessarily have a ruler in this size of a mat at home. So I'm going to show you how I fold this. I'm going to fold the edge of my selvage right up close to the folded edge of the fabric. And I like to have the folded edge pointing towards me because I like to line that up on my mat. And I'm going to look for the 16 inches to be this way, the height of the cheeseburgers, and the 20 inches to be this way. I'll be able to get that out of the width of fabric as long as this is about 16. And this doesn't have to be perfect. So you see how I could clean up this edge, but I'm not going to worry that much about it because I'm going to trim it further anyway. So I'm going to line this up roughly, and then I'm going to come in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I'm a little old school. I'm going to count it out. And then I'm just going to slice that. So this is going to turn into our pockets. We're going to set this aside for a second. And now we need to get 20 inches this way. But we'll be able to have our top of our bag right here, and the cheeseburgers will actually be lined up correctly. So now I just need to slice off the edges. And again, I'll slice off this piece. I can fold it again, but I'm just going to line this up with the selvage edge. So I'm cutting off those little holes. And the reason we cut off the selvage edge is because the way it was printed, that part of the fabric has a different structure. So it washes differently, it shrinks differently. So we're going to go ahead and take that off. Then we can measure over our 20 inches. And again, I'm not worried about this being perfect. So I'll just slice off the end. And this is your only real waste. But I'm sure we can find a good reason to use cheeseburgers somewhere. So now we've got the front and back of our main fabric. We're going to do the same for the lining. So you cut a 16 by 20 of that. And I've used this red that kind of looks like the ketchup. So solid fabrics don't have a front and back, so you don't have to worry about directionality or anything like that. So you do that the same way. And then for our straps fabric, we use a 1/4 yard, and we're going to cut a 4-inch strip with the fabric. So once we have that 4-inch strip with the fabric, the instructions ask us to cut this down to 36 inches. And that's so that the strap of the bag is easy to hold, not too long, not too short. So I have found that the easiest way to do this is to line up the fold as it came off with a line on my mat, and half of the 36 inches I need is 18, and I'll cut right here. So that's it. Now you've got all your pieces cut. The next thing I'm going to do is show you how to press everything together so it's ready to sew. So I'm going to start by showing you how to make the straps. We've cut our 36-inch piece, and the first thing we're going to do is fold that in half and press a center line. Once we've got the fold in half, we're going to come back and fold each half into the center. So we'll open this up. And I feel like this is a step that sometimes gets glossed over. So let me show you a trick. When you're folding this in, you don't want it to cross over. You want to come right up to this piece. And because it's going to keep going, I'm going to use my thumbnail to just give it a tiny little finger press there so that I don't have the iron taking it the wrong direction, and I'm not going to burn my delicate little fingers. And we're going to go all the way down that way, and I can just keep taking bite-sized pieces and pressing it to the center. Then we're going to take the ends and we're going to fold them in an eyeball about 1/4 inch. It's more important that they're even than that they're perfect, so I'm not going to get out my ruler here. But what I am going to do is cheat it a little bit so that there's slightly fatter fold towards the outside and slightly skinnier fold towards the inside. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I fold this back together, then these outside edges will stay inside that fold instead of poking out if it were perfectly even. So it's a tiny little hack, and it will make the ends even. So now that we've pressed this, we want to go ahead and put our webbing inside. So this comes as part of the kit, and the first thing that I did when I opened this up was panic, because it's not 36 inches long. And then I reread the instructions, and they are 36 inches long. That's because you're going to roughly center this in here, and it's not going to go edge to edge, and it's not supposed to. You did it right. So we're going to tuck this in to one side. And again, roughly centered, does not have to be perfect. And we're going to fold that fabric over and just kind of let it go back just the way we had it. And so the part of the reason that I didn't push that fabric all the way to the inside fold was because I was leaving a little bit of room. This webbing's not incredibly thick, but it's thick enough that that little bit of room lets this lay nicely. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch down. And I start by stitching down the length that's been folded, but I'm going to add a couple of clips to hold all of those layers so they don't wobble around on me. And you can absolutely use pins. I feel like this is enough layers that the clips do a nicer job for me. And I always have a handful next to my desk. So what we're going to do is sew down the length that we've clipped. Then we're going to sew all the way around and sew down the other end to give it a nice, neat look. And that will enclose the webbing in our quilter's cotton. I want to use a walking foot because so many of the pieces of this project have multiple layers. And a walking foot really helps you get through those multiple layers much more easily. You can absolutely do this with your regular foot, but you'll see me use the walking foot, starting with the fact that this has 4 layers of fabric and a layer of the webbing on this side. I'm going to start by pinching this and adding this in here. I don't want to use the regular 1/4 inch that we're used to. I'm going to use about 1/8 of an inch, but I'm not going to measure it very specifically. I'm just going to use the edge of my foot to make sure I'm inside a little bit. And we're off. Now this, remember, is where my panic had come in because the webbing doesn't start till about here. So I'm going to hold this with my finger as it goes and we get started. You may be a speed demon, that's cool. You may be slow, that's cool. Whatever speed you're comfortable with. We're just going to sail down the one edge. Go too fast, it starts being a running foot, that's fine too. Once you've done both your straps, come back, I'm going to show you how to cut that pocket, and then we will assemble the bag so that we can stitch that together. So to cut your pocket, I'm going to use what was left from our directional fabric being 3/4 of a yard. So when we cut our 16 inches, that leaves us from 27 about 11 inches. There's maybe 11.5 depending on how they cut your 3/4 of a yard in the shop. And I need about 10.5 or 11 inches vertically to fold over to become a pocket. So the next thing I'm going to do is open this up and decide which of these burgers is going to be my pocket. So I'm going to pick the one that I want. I think I'm going to go for this one. I'm going to use a 5-inch ruler because I need the pocket to be 5 inches. So I'm going to center this cheeseburger. It's kind of fussy cutting, but it's not quite so fussy cutting. So I'm going to take this middle of this ruler and line it up in the middle of that cheeseburger, and I'm just going to cut this strip. Now I'm right-handed, so I'm going to cut there, and then I'm going to flip this around. So now I can line this up, lay my ruler right on it again, and cut the other side. All right, so when I fold this pocket, it's not quite where I want it to be, and that's going to be okay. I'm going to show you how to actually move this around once it's sewn so that your cheeseburger is all centered up as well. So the first thing we're going to do is clean up this other edge. And so with it folded, I'm going to lay the 5-inch ruler on here again, move up to 5.5, which means it'll be a total of 11. So you can see I had a little bit of extra from the fabric shop. Just tidy that edge. Okay. So to make this pocket, the first thing we're going to do is fold this right sides together and stitch a regular 1/4 inch seam along this edge. And I can do this on my walking foot. I don't have to change feet. Just line this up on the edge. Okay, so now that this is sewn, we're going to iron this open or to one side as your preference. I go ahead and iron it open, so I do so with my fingers first. I'm going to bring this to the iron. I'm going to try not to get the fold or add any folds to that. I just want to kind of press that open. Now I'm going to turn this tube inside out, and that seam will be on the inside of the pocket, but it can move around so that we have a really nice centered cheeseburger, or whatever shape you're using. So that looks about right to me. I will take this back to the iron and I will press these two folds in. So we have a pocket. What we always do on the top of a pocket, because it's going to be left open, is top stitch that. So it's a nice finished edge and it doesn't roll around when you do end up washing it. But that's the only thing we have to do. These will eventually be enclosed, and this will be stitched to your lunch bag to hold it in place as well. So we just need one more stitch line, and we're going to do another 1/8 inch or roughly close to the edge. So now you have a pocket that's going to be ready to add. And we can trim off the edges and then set this aside. So you've got your straps made, now you've got your pocket made. Let's make the main body of the bag. So our instructions say to lay the lining fabric and the main fabric, the two right sides together. It's not specific about which way. So I lay my lining side first and smooth that out. And then I'm going to lay down my main fabric for the outside. The reason I did it this way is because, again, it's directional. So I want to make sure my cheeseburgers are pointing the right direction and that they're not all going to fall off onto the floor. So I can line this up where I can see that, smooth that together. They don't have to be perfect. And then we're going to take the shaped piece and smooth this out. And again, your top zipper edge is going to point towards the top of the hamburgers. So I like to point that away from me so everything looks like I'm reading it correctly. And now I'm going to pin in several spots to hold this all together. And that's it. You'll do that to both edges, and then what we're going to do is take this to the machine, and starting on this end, we're going to follow the printed stitch line and stitch all the way around. Okay, so now that you've sewn all of this, that part's done. You can take all the pins back out, and I'm going to show you how to trim down to that line. Line up my ruler right along that line. As far as my ruler is, slide that down, slice it off. We're going to cut the same here along that zipper edge. Even though we didn't sew anything, that's where we're going to turn this and then stitch it into the zipper. All right, here's where I get sneaky ninja. I'm going to cut this long line. Then we're going to cut, but not through our stitch line. All right, so we're going to cut all the way up to the edge, and I'm going to do that over here too, just cutting right along that line. And then I'm going to turn this, again, because I'm right-handed, so that I can cut along this line. All right, we're going to do the same on this side. And then we're going to trim all the corners to make turning this nice and smooth. What I mean by that is we're going to slice each of these little corners just like this. Again, close to but not through the stitching line on all the outer corners. All right, so that little confetti goes away. And then I'm also going to have you cut into these corners so that these corners are nice and easy to turn. So what I want you to do is position the scissors where you want them and just snip right up to the line. You can kind of do that a couple spots. Do that for you so you can see it above. Right to the line, and then just a couple little snips. So we're done on both corners here, and I'm going to do that on both inside corners here. Now we're going to turn the sucker inside out. So to do that, I'm going to reach between the two layers of fabric, and I'm just going to reach down into this corner, kind of poke it in, grab it, and pull it through. You can use a chopstick, you can use a purple thing. I actually am going to use very carefully the pointy edge of my snips. I'm not going to open them or snip anything, but I'm going to use them because they have the pointiest point I can find. You can also use a pencil, whatever you usually use. If this is your first time doing something, grab a pencil. Can't hurt anything with a pencil. And I'm going to poke out the corner. So I'm going to get it pretty close to pointy. And we'll do that in all the sides. So the two tricks I have for you, these inside corners we clipped, but they're still a little bunchy when I turn them inside out. I'm just going to roll it and gently tug it apart. I'm not trying to rip it in half, just a nice gentle tug and roll. And that settles that down to lay nice and flat. So I'm going to do that on the other inside corner. So now these are pretty good. They're laying down pretty well. But the other trick I learned for these is that if I pull this back and I use my fingernail to just finger press along the edge of the two fabrics, it magically has them lay perfectly flat. That was a game changer for me. So I'll do that all the way around where it needs it, but you can also just kind of give a little bit of a roll and seat those seams where you want them. Now, this side is left open. And you can see that our next step is to quilt this, but I don't want that to pull in and come away from the edge while I'm quilting. So I'm going to smooth this out, and I'm going to reach in here and I'm going to gently pull the edge of my ketchup lining out to meet my hamburgers and put a few pins along the edge. And since I'm going to be stitching this way, I want the pins facing away from me so I don't pin my little fingers while I'm stitching as well. So again, you'll have done this to both sides. Our first step then is going to be stitching along this edge where we had the pins, and that will hold that nice and straight, and then we can come back and decide how we're going to quilt it. So let's do that real quick. And again, I'm right along the edge. This seam allowance doesn't matter. It's going to be enclosed in the zipper, so you can do 1/8 of an inch, you can do 1/4 of an inch. Whatever you're going to do, just make sure it's even down the whole side. Now we're going to quilt it. For this burger bag, I'm going to do a crosshatch, and I'm going to show you how to do a very basic crosshatch that just sews in these two directions. The first step for me is to go ahead and use a ruler with a 45-degree line. So most of our rulers do have this, and that's going to help me set the line of stitching that I want to make. And then I'm going to use painter's tape or masking tape, and we have a whole episode of the Final Stitch with Natalie to show you some great tips and tricks for using painter's tape to do straight line quilting and sew beautiful straight lines. So I'm just going to give you the real basics here. I'm going to lay this down. I'm actually going to sneak this around so I can have my 45-degree lined up on the bottom too. I'm going to lay down this piece of tape. That's it. That's all we have to do. I'm now going to stitch right along the edge of that, and then we'll stitch on either side to make our first set of stitches. We'll just smooth that out and take it to the machine. So we talked about how pushing the corners out is my least favorite part. Quilting is my very favorite part. So again, tell me, have you ever done some quilting on your home machine? It's actually easier than it looks, especially with a nice small project like this. I've got a walking foot and a roll of tape. I'm unstoppable. I can make nice straight lines. All right, we're going to sew right off the edge, and that's our first line. We'll trim the threads. And now we can take the tape off. And what I did was I just ran the foot of my machine along the edge of that tape, so I know that the angle and the line is correct. I don't have to worry about sewing on the tape or sewing through the tape or anything crazy like that. That's the only time I'm going to even use the tape I'm done with it. What I'm now going to do is use the bed of my machine as the edge for that line and start moving to the right, flip it around and move it to the left. Let me show you what I mean. That thread line, I'm going to use the edge of my machine and decide that that is how far apart I want these to be. So now I just sew a nice straight line. And again, the walking foot's your friend because it doesn't let things wobble as much. And we just go straight across. Get to the edge and we have a little bit here. That's okay. I'm just going to lift my needle, kind of push this forward, and start again. You can decide if you want to do just this little corner or not. I will just because. Okay. So we've got this half done, evenly spaced. Now we're going to flip this around and evenly spaced going the other direction. Pause here. I'm going to go ahead and clip all my threads and meet you back here in a minute. But what I want to point out first is that I use the white thread, and you might think at first that's going to show up so much on all those cheeseburgers. It doesn't. White and light threads really blend in really nicely, and yes, totally shows on the red. The instructions say to now take your strap, making sure there's not an extra twist in it, attach it to the bag. So we're going to start with that. They say to come in 6 inches from each side. I'm going to have you come in 5 3/4 inches. So I'm going to lay my ruler down, the 5 3/4 mark. I'm going to lay my strap, and I'm actually going to twist it so that that folded part is to the outside and the double part is to the inside. And I'm just going to take a clip and clip it in place here at the bottom. So not too scientific. And I'm going to do it from the other side. 5 3/4 on the edge of the bag, and then here. Now when they say an extra twist, this is exactly what they're talking about. If I stitch this down, this handle is going to be messy. So I want to have just the one twist. And again, this is going to be towards the inside. And now my handle will work perfectly. So this is the part where I'm going to vary gently from the instructions. Again, I came in 5 3/4 instead of 6 inches. I'm going to now fold this out of the way, and I'm going to use my ruler here along this. This is going to become the bottom of the bag. So I'm going to line my pocket up with the bottom of the bag. I'm going to lay my pocket here between the two straps. I'm going to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to lay the straps down. And if the straps are going to cover it, we're in good shape. So I'm going to use one pin right in the middle, stab my cheeseburger here, and I'm going to take this to the machine, and I can take this back off so that I don't have a lot of wonkiness. I'm going to take this to the machine, and I'm going to stitch along this bottom edge, just a little top stitch, to secure the pocket to the side of the bag. So now my pocket is attached. So I'm going to put the straps back on, and now I'm going to measure in 5 3/4 up here, lay this down on the inside, kind of smooth it out, and I'm going to just use a clip to hold it in place here at the top. 5 3/4, smooth that down, and use a clip. Now the instructions say to add a square with an X. That's going to give this strap extra stability and strength so that it doesn't come off the bag with extra use. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to lay the ruler now against the top of the bag, and we're going to make a mark. I'm using this little chalk pencil because I can actually draw that away, but you can use just a regular pencil. And make a little mark here, and you can just barely see that pink, but it'll brush away. So now 3/4 of an inch is my friend. I'm going to move down about 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to flip this around so it's easier for you to see. So I can look right through this ruler and line up the 1/4 inch mark and make another line here. And now I'm going to freehand a little X between those two. And that will tell me where to sew and give me a line to follow when I get to the machine. So again, you're going to do this to both sides. Now we're going to take it to the machine, and the idea is we're going to stitch up this side, following the stitch line we've already made, and then we're going to make the X. So we're going to come across the top, down, across the bottom, up, and across the top again. The top is the only place we'll do twice, and it'll, again, give it extra strength and stability. Then we'll just sail right down the edge and repeat on the other side. So let me show you how that's done. So right on the edge, and just follow your line of stitching. And if you end up next to it, it's a decorative touch. I totally did that on purpose. In fact, this is a great place to use a decorative stitch if you want to. I know sometimes we have 112 stitches on our machine and we only use 3. So tell me, do you like to use decorative stitches? Do you find yourself using them? What's your favorite decorative stitch? And you can share pictures with us using the hashtag MSQC Show and Tell. Love looking at what you make. So make sure you show us pictures of your lunch bag, pictures of your decorative stitches, pictures of all your projects. Okay, so I stitched across the top, pivot all the way around, and we're going to follow that line. And this is one of those close enough is good enough. If I am just a hair north of my drawn line, it's not going to matter. I'm going to take this nice and slow and then pivot all the way around and come back up this other side. Again, if you misjudge it, it's just decorative. Own it. You don't have to be perfectly on your line. All right, now I'm going to sail down this side. Say sail, I'm going to try to jog instead of run. And what this is doing is enclosing this pocket on this side. So that side's done. We're going to repeat the process on this strap. So now you have a whole half of the bag done, and yours has this extra pocket. So you can use your fingers to brush away the chalk. If you've used a water-soluble pen, you can use a damp cloth to wipe that away. Your markings will go away, and you'll be left with this really handy strap. So there's 2 steps left. Step 1 is to add the zipper, which is the Zippity-Do-Done zipper, and I'll show you how to do that. And then we're going to assemble the whole bag. So we're going to add the Zippity-Do-Done zipper. I love installing these because they have these flaps that mean we're just going to slide our fabric right in there. So grab your zipper and some pins, and I'll show you how to attach this to both sides of the bag. Now that you've done this to both sides, what I've done is pin this handle out of the way. So I'm going to do that here too. So I just fold it down and pin it. In this case, I can pin it to the pocket. And I've only done a pocket on one side, but if you've got a pocket on both sides, you can even tuck this into the pocket, but you want this out of the way to do your zippers. Now I'm going to choose one side, doesn't matter which, and I am going to start by centering up my zipper. And you'll notice your zipper is a little bit longer than your bag. So we're going to eyeball it and center it up, and we're just going to slide this raw edge inside this, just kind of like we were doing when we made the strap. I'm going to make sure it hangs off a little bit on each end, and I'm going to use about 4 pins to pin through all of those pieces. So I want a nice sturdy pin, and I can trim away any little threads that are in my way. And what we're going to do is do one side at a time. So now what we're going to do is go back to the machine, and we're going to stitch right along this edge. But the trick is, I'm going to turn this over, we're going to want to catch the back edge. And so we don't want to sew too close to the edge because we might miss this edging completely. So we're going to sew somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 and stitch down here. Now this is another great place for decorative stitch. You can have fun with stitching this on. I would recommend a straight stitch first to hold it on and then come back and do a decorative stitch. I'm placing this under my walking foot. And I'm just going to use, again, the edge of the walking foot and stitch down along the edge. And there we go. So we've got one nice neat long stitch. It's holding everything in, and same on the back. It's caught the back and everything's nice and neat. So now we need to do this to the other side. Now, this is ever so slightly tricky, but it's not hard. And if it's off a little bit, no one's gonna know in the end. But again, this is a trick for this, is I'm gonna line up this edge and poke this in here. I'm going to try to make this a nice straight line of the fabric. I don't care if it's lined up with the zipper, with a nice straight line of the fabric. I'm going to put a pin in here. And then instead of pinning all the way down, I'm going to start now down this end, lining this up. So there's a nice straight line, and put a pin here. Then I can come back to the middle, smooth it in, and add a couple of more pins. I'm going to kind of fold and roll this up so it will fit under my machine. It's nice and squishy. So then I can lay this up, start just off the edge, and begin. If I were to do this again, I might actually come back with a black thread so it's hidden, or I might come through with a red, yellow, and green thread so I have all of the condiments on my cheeseburger bag. So my zipper is attached. Now what I need to do is make sure that this zipper pull is not going to fling right off the end. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to stitch over this, and I'm going to back stitch over the zipper part. The zipper is a nylon, so you can stitch right over it with no problem. So I'm going to stitch pretty close to the edge and just stitch across the zipper, back stitching over here. So we'll come in here, and again, I don't need to change my zipper foot. Across, back stitch, and along. And that just creates a stop so that as we do this next piece, we are not going to lose our zipper, because that would be sad. No one should be sad. All right, now that we've got those, we're going to snip off the excess zipper. Now at this point, the June Tailor company says you can use a zigzag on either end. You could serge them. You could even add a little bit of fray check. So whichever method works best for you. I'm going to keep going and live dangerously and simply snip off the edge. And again, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to flip that around and just snip off the edge. And I got a little bit here. I can just come back with a little bit of fray check or zigzag right off the edge or serge that. Again, whatever works. Now we're going to stitch the whole bag together. This is the last step, and it's going to come together, and it happens really fast. But we're going to need to turn it inside out. So we want you to open this zipper a little bit so that we'll be able to reach our hand in here and turn this out later. Okay. Got just a little thread here. Okay, so step one, again with the handles still pinned out of the way, I'm going to flip this on itself. We're going to line up these two long edges, and this time we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance and stitch down the side. I'm going to say a 1/2 inch-ish. It doesn't have to be perfect, but from here on out you want all of your seam allowances to be consistent, and then the bag will come together nicely. So again, I'm going to come back to the machine. So you've got all these layers. This is where the walking foot is going to come in the most handy. You can do it with a regular foot if you go nice and slow, but this is where the walking foot is your best friend. So I'm going to slide this under here with all the layers. And again, 1/2 inch-ish. So I'm going to use, on the bed of my machine, there's a marking that says 1/2. So that's for my 1/2 inch. So I'm going to lay this down, And I'm going to keep an eye on that. And I'm going to line this up and just do a couple of inches at a time. And I can see by my stitch line that I'm getting close to the strap. So I want to slow down for a minute, and I'm going to go over this nice and easy. There we go, walking foot's a champ, and then we keep going. Get nice and easy over the straps. And if these corners don't line up perfectly, I'm not going to worry about it. Close enough's good enough. And I'm going to lock my stitches at the end. Now, I may have forgotten to do so at the beginning. I can either go back and do that now, or just be careful the next time. So now that I've got this stitched together, the instructions say to press this open. So I told you before, I'm not really worried about pressing this whole thing open and spending a lot of time on the iron. What they're really after is that this seam right at the edge is going to be open. So I'm going to lay this down and use my thumb to kind of smooth that down so that that's nice and pressed open right at the edge. So I'm going to lay this down again, and I'm going to use that 1/2 inch line mark again. Pull my clip out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to start, and then I'm going to backstitch. Keep an eye on that 1/2 inch mark. And then when I get to the end, I'm going to backstitch again. And that's it. I'm going to do that on the other side. Backstitch to get started. I'm going to kind of slow down as I go over the big seam. When I get to the end, we'll backstitch again. Okay, this is the part that's hard to describe but so easy to do. It's really satisfying to get these 4 corners done. We have the 4 corners we're going to box, and this is why this has been the weird shape it has been. Because all you're going to do is take this seam, kind of finger press it open again, and then pull these corners out and stitch along this side. Start in a little bit, take a couple stitches, backstitch all the way off, and then back on. Across, right off the edge, and backstitch. Okay, so you're gonna do that 3 more times. 1 more corner. So close, I can almost taste the cheeseburger. Okay, so again, I've lined up my seam, I pulled my edges nice and taut, and add just a couple clips, and you can wing it. If you get to that 4th one and you're getting cheeky, just wing it. But I like the clips because they get me an extra pair of hands almost when I get this far. Backstitch off the edge. And kind of smoosh that away. That's it. Your bag is done. Okay, it looks funky right now, and I want to reach in there, but I know there's 2 pins in there. So I'm going to very carefully peel the zipper open the rest of the way and reach in and pull my 2 pins out, releasing my straps, and then I can just fling it. And you might want to trim your threads first. I get eager at this point to see what it's going to look like. I'm just going to poke out these with my finger in the corner. I'm not going to try to trim anything down because we want all those seams to stay enclosed, so this is nice and washable and usable, and you don't have any raw edges. So this project comes together honestly so fast and so nice and neat. And the zipper just works. And so now you have this beautiful little cheeseburger bag. Well done. And you can put whatever you want right here in the pocket. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on how to make the June Tailor Insulated Lunchbox Kit. Whether you use 1 pocket, 2 pockets, no pockets, or decide to make something that's really delicious. Lunch is not included. We hope you enjoyed this tutorial.